So, so the aim of this presentation is to write a Hello World REST API using Spring MVC structure. So let's go through the agenda that we have. So agenda is to have a brief look at the tech stack, generate a Spring Boot application, import the project into Eclipse, deploy the basic application, add controller, and define an API. Demonstrate the consumption of the API, add Swagger to the project, demonstrate the API documentation generated by Swagger. Add HTML form to access the API, add ISM libraries to the project, and demonstrate API accessing ISM. So what is the tech stack? We are going to use REST as an API style, Spring MVC, Eclipse as an IDE, Maven to build the project, Swagger to document the API, and HTTP as the access protocol. So REST API is representational state transfer. That's the full description of REST API. So what is REST? It is a software architectural style of web, the most common way to expose web services. It's an approach to communication that is often used in the development of web services. Web service conforming to the constraints of the REST is called RESTful service. A RESTful system typically, but not always, communicate over HTTP with the same verb: get, post, pull, delete, etc. So what are the alternatives to REST? SOAP, which you guys may be familiar with. We have used SOAP messages, SOAP APIs in our interfaces, which also stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. So why shall we use REST and not SOAP UI? There are numerous reasons. You can search over the internet, but the ones that I found were: it's lighter, fit for use over internet, its client-server separation, simplicity, and scalability. Now let's look at some of these tech stacks. So Spring Framework is what we're going to use. So what is Spring Framework? It's an application framework and inversion of control container for the Java platform. If you wanted me to explain inversion of control, we can look at it at some later date. But what it essentially is instead of creating the object like we create in Java, whereby we know what it takes to create that object before we create it. So you have to know the constructor and stuff. But Spring Application Framework provides for situations where you do not know how to create your object and you don't care. So you have that in configuration somewhere, and the system knows how to create the object. You just inject it, and it's all created for you. You don't need to know ins and outs of that constructor of that class that you wanted to create. So Spring Framework is a set of library jars to provide some core functionalities. The framework's core features can be used by any Java application, but there are extensions on top of the Java EE platform to build web applications. It is an alternative to, replacement for, or even addition to the EE Java Beans. The Spring Framework includes several models that provide a range of services. Some of them I have listed here: aspect-oriented programming, authentication, inversion of control container, and transaction management. So why shall we use a Spring Framework? Because it provides hooks for extensions and customization for web applications and RESTful web services. offers a high-level abstraction for web-based applications by tightly coupling all interfaces to the servlet API. MVC paves the way for cleaner front-end code, and it has got out-of-box support for HTTP-based protocols and EJB client integration. Now let's look at Spring Boot. That's something that we will use in our example. So let's just discuss what we mean by Spring Boot application. To create a Spring Boot application, all you have to do is to put some annotations specific to Spring Boot application. But essentially what it is Spring's convention over configuration solution for creating standalone production grade Spring based applications that you can just run. It takes an opinionated view of the Spring platform and third-party libraries so you can get started quickly. In essence, you can write you can use any style in creating a Spring framework based application, but with Spring Boot application, it assumes few things for you to make it convenient for you to create an application quickly. So there is a very little configuration needed. It creates standalone Spring applications. It embed Tomcat or Jetty directly. No need to deploy WAR files and stuff. Provides opinionated starter POMs to simplify your Maven configuration. Automatically configure Spring whenever possible. Provide production ready features such as metrics, health checks, and externalized configurations. Absolutely no code generation and no requirement for XML configuration. All this is achieved when you annotate your class with @Spring Boot application. So what are the alternatives to Spring Boot? There's something called Spring Roo, and I guess there are some more, but this is the one that I found over the internet. Now the IDE that we are going to use is Eclipse, Mars in particular, because it has got inbuilt support for Spring framework. I'm not sure if I had to download the plugin or did it come with it. I guess we'll try and find out. Then we have got Swagger. Now you have got a web service and you have written an API. Now somebody wants to use that API. You need to be able to tell them as to how to use the API. How do you do that? Either you can have handwritten documents that you can send them telling them what your get methods are, what your put methods are, and what the parameters they need to pass, that sort of thing. Or you could use a tool like Swagger that will generate the documentation for you, and this documentation can be read by humans as well as computers. So you have an API and you want to tell clients how to use the REST API. There is no real standard for at least de facto standard to expose a REST contract. Many API resort to a human readable documentation which is manually edited and thus hard to keep perfectly synchronized with the API. Another way is to create the documentation from the code itself. So what is Swagger? Swagger is a specification for documenting REST API. It specifies the format, the URL, the methods, and representations. It provides tools to generate or compute the documentation from the application code. This is why it's that important. If you change the code, it automatically computes it and generates the new documentation for you. As an application developer, you write web services using your favorite framework. Swagger can scan your code and expose the documentation on some URL. So why shall we use Swagger? Because any client can consume this document, which comes as XML or JSON document, and learn how to use your REST web service, which HTTP methods to call on which URL, which input documents to send, which status code to expect, etc. So it has support for different frameworks, including that of Spring MVC. I think that's one of the reasons why we are using Swagger. What are alternatives to Swagger? I searched the Google and I found a couple of them with Mashup, Massurf, or Masseri, I don't know how to pronounce it, 3-scale, Apiary, and I guess few more. Now let's look at how to create a REST API using Spring Boot application. So there is this site that you could go to that will create your initial package for you, and that's a very quick way of creating a Spring Boot application. And this is the site Start Spring IO. You go in there and a few things are checked in for you, like Maven project, and this is what you're going to use with Spring Boot 136. You create a group, so I've called it com.causeway example, and maybe hello REST API. You need to give a name for your example, and I will call hello REST API. Okay. You also need to select your dependencies. So dependencies I'm selecting at the moment is full stack web development with Tomcat at Spring MVC. And all you have to do then is to say generate project. Now it has downloaded the new generated product is here. So if you just make a copy of it and put it wherever you wanted to create your project, I've got Java Dev API and I put it in here and extract it here. So as you could see, I've got my hello REST. I don't like hello REST within hello REST. I could say hello API, just rename it for now. But in here it has created your hello REST and all your files. So I will create a AC project directory in here. Where is new? Just one sec. Okay. This is a standard directory that I create for my Eclipse projects. All that I need to do is start Eclipse. It will take a little while and open this project. I forgot to show you the directory that was automatically created for you when you generated that project using Start Spring IO. So within hello REST you have your SRC directory, obviously, and you have got test, main and test, so it does all that for you. Then Java, resources, stuff like that, all the directory and everything that you would need for a Maven project and a Spring Boot project, everything is created for you in there. Now when you go to Eclipse, all you have to do is, apart from checking all these boxes out, you'll say import project from the folder and direct it to the folder that you went to where you extracted it, which is Hello API. So you go in there, Hello API, and say OK. It will say detect and configure nested projects under the given location. You say yes, next, and it shows you Hello API. And I don't know why it says two projects. This is not a project, and you don't want to create anything for it. So all you need is C Java, Dev API, and Hello API. You do a finish, and soon it should detect the project. It hasn't detected as yet. Come on. It takes a couple of goes sometimes. No, it hasn't created anything. Let's try, give it one more go. It may not be the right directory I would have gone to. So hello REST API, if you go in there, I think it wants this one, hello REST. You say okay. See, it has come to this. You say next. It's found that, and you say, and it has now recognized the project. See, accept that. Still okay. Go to Workbench, and you should be able to see your project imported. Let's see if it gives you any exception. I don't think it has got any exception. Now, very quickly, if I look at your POM XML, this is generated for Maven projects as you use Ant to build your project in desktop and also interfaces. If you have got a Maven project, it uses pom.xml. This is like Ant script. It's one of the Maven scripts that it uses to describe the dependency, download the dependencies, and also build your WAR file or whatever deployable you wanted to build. So very quickly, I want to look at the POM XML to make sure everything's in there. Still building it. So what I'm looking for is, say, Spring Boot starter parent. I was expecting it to say web in there, but let's see what it does. So as you can see, the different directory that is created, it recognizes the fact that it's a Spring project. It has created this package, and it has given you hello REST application.java. I think this is the container it's talking about. So this can be deployed and run. So if I just right click on this and say run as Spring Boot application, that should start the container. So that has started your application. So that's stage one. What you have done, you have created a Spring Boot application using start Spring, which has generated everything for you. And if you run it, it will start the container for you. You need to add stuff onto it now. Before we go to that, please notice this annotation, add Spring Boot application annotation. This is what makes it a Spring Boot application. By putting that in, it has taken an opinionated view of what you should be using. For example, your Tomcat server and other stuff. So we just looked at creating a Spring Boot application. So the framework is ready. Now we need to add a web service, and we need to be able to call it. So what I'm going to do is add a we call controller. You will see the rest of MVC at later date. For now, I'm just creating a controller method. It's part of your MVC structure. So I've just one sec. So here is a controller that I have created. And as you could see, it's riddled with loads of annotations. It says it's a controller, it's a REST controller, and it gives you request mapping. I didn't call it controller. Instead, I've called it controller one. The reason for that is controller is also a package within, if you could see, Spring Framework. So I couldn't use controller, hence it doesn't have to be called controller, as long as it's annotated with add controller and at REST controller. You can call it whatever you like, but that's the controller. So what I have in here, and let's get rid of rest of the methods and try to keep it simple. I've got a method in there. This is not what I wanted to say. Let's say hello world. I've given it a mapping to say how to call my URL, and it says it has got one hello. So if I just stop the Tomcat and restart it, that should include this controller as well. And what it will do is scan through this controller and make this service available. All it is prints hello world. So if I just restart it, let's see if it's giving any exceptions. Now it has started cleanly. It says started hello REST application in however many seconds. Let's do so. Right, so if I try this URL, as you could see, your hello world application is ready. So what you have done in here is created a web service that just returns a text called hello world. So you come in here, you put these annotations and also define these URLs. So it says when you say request mapping and give it a string here, it says in order to come into this controller, this is the one that you'll use. It's quite important to remember how these are structured. So if you look, it's a local host and it's running on 8080 port, and it says one hello. This is one hello has come from here. But to call this particular method, you have given it another string. So in order to get here, you have to say first hello on top of one hello. So that's what we have done here, first hello. The minute you said, it comes in here. As you could see, it says hello world. It comes in here. It does. So you have created a web service now using Spring's MVC structure and Spring Boot application. Now we'll try to add Swagger at this stage. And see, by the way, you could create as many as controllers you want. These controls are basically the APIs, if you like. So you can, as I said, you can create as many as you want of these controllers. Some people try to keep them in a certain directory called API, but I don't keep it. It can be part of that package and it looks better up there. So next we will look at how to create, how to put Swagger into here. So first thing you do, you go into your POM XML and change the dependencies. So if I just open it, you'll have to add a couple of more dependency in there. Let me find those dependencies. Right. You can Google, by the way, these things. So these are the dependency I have found. They already had dependencies on whatever source encoding UTF and Spring Framework. At the end of it, I would put these two dependencies as well. One is Spring Fox. There are different ways of achieving the same thing. You could use a different package. I guess if you look for it, your different versions will have different um, different way of putting these dependencies so that you'll have a different group ID and different artifact ID. The one that I seems to work for me are these two, and these are the latest versions. So you are saying group ID is IO Spring Fox, and artifact ID is Swagger 2. Group ID is IO Spring Fox again, and Spring Fox Swagger UI. This is UI support. Now, if I just clean and build the project, stop it and restart it. So you've just put the dependency. I'm just checking if any exceptions. No, it downloaded all the dependencies and run your container. So what you now need to do is add another class for Swagger configuration. I call it Swagger configuration. You can call it whatever you like. I will just create a class in here called Swagger configuration. If I go in there, again, as you could see, it's still looking for some dependencies. Spring Fox, it hasn't downloaded because although we did mention it in our POM XML, because we hadn't used it, it hadn't downloaded it. So let's try to stop our Tomcat and rebuild the projects. It's not doing anything. So I go to POM XML and say Maven build. I guess that should do the job. It has got some exception. The build could not read one project, and reason for that is dependency in Swagger. Right, okay, so when I copied and pasted, I made a mistake. Let's look at POM XML. It's not within dependencies. I put it outside dependencies. That's a stupid thing to do. Let's just copy and paste it there. There is a tag called dependencies that should have been in there. Let's try to build it again. Now the errors are gone. So let's look at what this Swagger configuration class looks like. Right, all it has is API info class. So you put different lots of string to say describe your API, basically a URL, an email address, licensing information, stuff like that. And there is not much. The only important thing is in here is to put this path rightly for your API. As I was saying, some people try to keep all their APIs or all their controllers in a directory called API. I have chosen to put it in under the base package, and hence my pathing says you should be able to find all the APIs in the current working directory. So if I just run restart my Tomcat. Hopefully that will start. Hopefully, if everything goes all right, I should be able to get the documentation for my API. As you can see, let me see if it's still running. So just refresh this page. Yes, so it returns me hello world. And if I go to the other URL for the Swagger documentation, press that, and there is a nice, beautiful Swagger API. It gives you all the detail of what the controller is and what the API is in there. So if I click on in here, it tells me you have got this method called first hello. Is there a delete for the first hello? Is there a get for first hello? Or things like that. So if I look at each one of them, I'll give you deep details. I guess the only one that we have got is get one, isn't it? Or I think that's the one. Okay, so that's basically it. So you have got your API based on Spring MVC structure and a Swagger. Next time we will look at how to put a client or HTML form to access this information. Thanks very much.